Have you ever noticed how some of the most important systems in our world don't really seem that important at all? They don't announce themselves, they don't trend, they're not viral. They just do what they do quietly underneath the surface. There's a piece of technology that runs most of the internet. Your phone touches it, your bank depends on it, your favorite apps are built on top of it. Most people couldn't even tell you the name of it if you were to ask them. Now, imagine that kind of influence coming out of a city that most people would just have written off. Compton, California. This is a place that we associate with violence, survival, and sound bites that we hear in the news, not technological infrastructure. Yet from that environment, we have an artist that didn't chase the charts, that didn't chase trends, but instead he studied systems. He learned how stories move people. He learned how culture gets built quietly from the bottom up. Today, Kendrick Lamar is mainstream in terms of visibility, but underground in substance. So when we think about Kendrick Lamar, I don't want you to think about a viral app. I want you to think more instead about Linux. That's right, Linux, a system that's built in obscurity, a system that has earned the respect of all of its users, a system that has scale without selling out, a system that quietly runs the world as we know it. Today, we're unboxing how Kendrick Lamar's career rise mirrors the way that foundational technology grows. And even more, it teaches about careers, creativity, and how to build something that lasts.
Boxing my pain away, boxing my dreams, boxing my hopes away, boxing my shame. Boxes on boxes, I'm stacking my grief, boxing these haters that slander my name.
All right, so who is Kendrick Lamar? Most people would answer that question by saying he was the Super Bowl 59 halftime headliner who dropped bars in front of a largely white audience who thought his performance was, well, different from what they expected. Maybe you can answer the question of who is Kendrick Lamar by saying in 2026, he was the most awarded rapper in Grammy history, totaling 27 awards, including Best Rap Album of the Year. If we're focusing on who K-Dot is as an artist and not necessarily the person, maybe he's best known for delivering us multiple bodies of complete work with releases that combine his technical rap abilities and storytelling, from projects known as Good Kid, M.A.A.d City to Pimp a Butterfly, Damn, and Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers. So by the way, I know he dropped GNX. I'm not a big fan of GNX. I'm keeping it real with you. It's just what it is. I'm sorry. Well, maybe the best way that we can talk about who is Kendrick Lamar, maybe it's not using context from the artist himself or his personal life, but maybe the best way to explain who Kendrick Lamar is to explain what Linux is. Linux is an operating system. It runs behind most of our computers. It's what sustains most of our internet. In simplest fashion, Linux is like the invisible machines that pretty much make up our websites, and it makes our apps functional. So Linux pretty much powers about 70 to 80% of web servers and corporate backends. So when you think about cloud platforms such as AWS, which is Amazon Web Services, or if you think about Google Cloud or Microsoft Azure, Linux is what powers those cloud platforms. Metaphorically speaking, think about Linux as a restaurant. What we see when we walk into a restaurant, it might be the dining room. It could be like that server that greets you. And then you might see the menus, right? This is kind of like the website. This is like what the user usually sees when they open up their device or their computer, is what they see. But Linux is the thing that makes everything visible. It makes everything operational. So meaning the kitchen, that's Linux. They're in the back of the house making your food. The refrigerator, the oven door, the staff and the cooks in the back of the house preparing your food, that's Linux. It's the lifeblood of the restaurant. Linux is the technical infrastructure that we use for all of our devices. All right, bro, we're talking about Kendrick Lamar and Linux computers. Where are we going with this? That's probably the question that you're asking yourself. In order to answer the question, where are we going with this, I think it's important to know, where have we come from? Meaning, what's Kendrick Lamar's backstory? How did he get to become as successful as he is? Same with Linux. All right, so back in the day, if you were to work at maybe a university or some kind of lab or just a prominent organization or company, you were probably running on AT&T's version of Unix, which is a powerful software system. And That system was locked behind licenses and legal agreements. And if you were at home or in an office, you're probably running on Microsoft Windows, which is very convenient, it's familiar, but it's completely closed. And if you couldn't afford it, Apple sold this beautifully designed machine. It was premium in terms of its experiences, but it's welded shut. Every major system belonged to some sort of corporation. Every powerful tool as we know it, it needs permission slips in order for it to operate. So back in 1991, a 21-year-old computer science student, he was running into a problem. His name was Linus Torvalds. And essentially his problem was he wanted to access his operating system. He wanted to see how things were functioning on the back end, what kind of drove and powered his device. And so he couldn't readily access his infrastructure. He couldn't just open up his computer and configure it because essentially his device was owned by the corporations that sold him his product. And because he couldn't access his operating system, he did the next best thing. He built his own operating system. So his goal wasn't to start an organization. He wasn't trying to market a product. He wasn't creating a business plan. He just wanted to open his device, fix it, and improve it, and then share it online. What was birthed was Linux. Linux didn't compete against the mainstream. It really created its own path. It was a path that was rooted in creativity and substance. It was a path that was sort of anti-mainstream, a path that was similar to Kendrick Lamar and what he would travel in his career. So when you think about Linux origin of traveling this anti-mainstream path, and now thinking about Kendrick Lamar, I immediately think about one of Kendrick Lamar's earliest songs called The Heart Part 2, which was on his Overly Dedicated project in 2010, where he wrote this.
I swear to God, half of y'all just don't know Kendrick. The school of hard knocks, we was the first ones in attendance. You walking down that block, he got shot, you a no eyewitness. You just mind your business. You just turn your head, kneel down, and then tie your tennis. It's kind of scary, ain't it? You can't act like no that only got Tyler Perry famous.
So Tyler Perry caught it straight for sure on this one. But when you just think about those bars from Kendrick Lamar, it tells a story in itself, where he's from, and more importantly, why he's here. Growing up in Compton, California, or better yet, Bompton, California, is known for being Piru blood territory. The consequences are real. Violence is real. In the beginning of his career, the foundation was set for Kendrick. You know, when he had projects such as Youngest Head Nigga in Charge in 2003, or Training Day in 2005, and then Overly Dedicated in 2010. His foundation was not an attempt for virality, but rather an attempt to give his testimony and his story to the world, which was rooted in Compton, California. Kendrick Lamar's career started amongst prominent juggernauts in the hip hop industry, including Jay-Z, Lil Wayne, Kanye West, 50 Cent, T.I. So amongst these juggernauts, Kendrick Lamar was one of those few young guys that wanted their own version of success, but not necessarily the version that was prescribed by the mainstream. He wanted to be on the same level as a Jay-Z and a Lil Wayne, but he wanted to do it in a way that was different, that was unique to him. So when Kendrick Lamar broke through to the mainstream with Good Kid, Mad City, it wasn't a collection of singles. It wasn't a collection of songs that was aimed at the mainstream or aimed to hit the Billboard Top 100s. It was a case study of his childhood. It was a cinematic autopsy of Compton, California. It was a refusal to flatten trauma into entertainment. So when you think about Kendrick Lamar's breakthrough, the same could be said with Linux as a breakthrough. It didn't have to chart on the billboards, metaphorically speaking. That moment didn't come with fanfare or worldwide adoption. By the late 1990s and early 2000s, Linux had become the default operating system for web servers that powered 70 to 80% of all websites. It was the foundation of cloud computing for systems such as AWS, Google Cloud, Microsoft Azure. It was the kernel behind Android, which today runs over 3 billion devices worldwide. It became the backbone for 100% of the world's top 500 supercomputers. One of Linux's products was Ubuntu, which released back in 2004. And this was the translation layer, the moment where Linux became legible to everyday human beings. For the first time, you didn't need an engineer to install Linux. It came with a clean interface. It came with built-in apps. and long-term support, meaning it didn't just work, but it kept on working. The real breakthrough wasn't necessarily Ubuntu's interface, but it was its adoption. Universities used it because it was free and reliable. Startup companies used it because it was stable and it was quick to deploy. Cloud providers offered it by default because it scaled pretty easily and cleanly. And Linux didn't have any commercials. It just has stability. So the land is playing, here's what we're really unboxing. The mainstream is built for speed. Capitalism rewards what performs right now. It rewards what's catchy. It rewards what's easy to sell. But what the system rewards isn't what the system depends on. The internet doesn't run on commercials. It runs on Linux, literally. Culture doesn't move on hooks alone, but the culture of hip hop moves on substance. Substance is anti-establishment by nature, not because it wants to rebel, but because it refuses to be disposable. Trends are gonna come and go. Foundations get built. So if your work feels slower, heavier, and not necessarily viral, you might not be behind. You might be building infrastructure in a world that is obsessed with interfaces. Be blessed.
Boxing my pain away, boxing my dreams, boxing my hopes away, boxing my shame. Boxes on boxes, I'm stacking my grief, boxing these haters that slander my name.